Welcome to Reimagine the Contact Center. I'm your host, Mark Bernstein, and my guest today is Steve Biederman, passionate promise keeper and president and CEO of NobleBiz. Steve, I am so glad to see you today.
It's good to see you, Mark. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
No, seriously, my pleasure. It's a good day for a podcast. We just announced in a press release the new partnership with Balto NobleBiz.
You know, that wasn't planned for this call, right? It was just coincidental and opportunistic as we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I didn't plan it, but I'll tell you, a lot of smart people at Balto might have said, you know what, it might be good if the podcast is on the same day as the press release. I don't know. I wouldn't put it past them.
Well, then that's the team I want to start working with.
Right. Well, we love working with your team, Steve. And one of the ways that we actually found you is, we were on your guys' podcast with Christian, Stories of the Contact Center. And that thing, you look at any list on Google of top 10 contact center podcasts, consistently makes the list. So huge kudos to you all and what you built there.
Well, Christian Montez is our global director of sales. And when I came to him and I said, Christian, you're really the right person for this, he was like, oh my God, does that have to go with this title of, this new position you put me in? And I said, well, it doesn't have to, but I think people are going to get to know you quicker that way. And he's done an amazing job, a really amazing job. And we love this idea of podcast. So I'm excited about yours, Mark. Really, really, yours in particular went very well for us.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Steve, really same thing on our side. And that kind of actually starts us off for the conversation today. Because I was thinking it would be really cool for our audience to be able to get in your shoes and get in my shoes and hear, what is it like to be the founder CEO of a contact center tech company? And one of the things you just pointed out, Steve, is looking for opportunities to make the most of your best people's talents and abilities in ways that challenge them and also progress their careers. So maybe I'll just start there. How do you identify across the people in your company when you should be giving someone that extra opportunity, when you think that they have more that they can contribute and they just need a chance?
Well, it's an interesting industry. I've often called it blue collar industry, from the regard that many of us that have found success really just started on the telephone. Way back before when they invented telephones, I started on a telephone. And at that point, we had a wax string in between two. And look at me now, But the idea is that because it's a hard-working industry, and it's kind of frightening. Many people have a hard time picking up a phone, getting in front of people, talking to people. It really requires, in my mind, people that know the business and know each other and get comfortable with the idea that communication is sort of the baseline for it, no matter what you're building or using. So that, for me, that led me into one position after the next and sort of iteratively built up my own career, and generally within this industry. And I've always felt that I don't want to look at a resume when I look at somebody. I want to look at somebody and I want to say, are they gutsy? Are they passionate? Can they embrace the same values that I have? And if they're those things, we can teach them the tactics and the strategies that go with it for management and executives. So to me, it's really about looking around yourself first and saying, who's next? And then you get people that buy into the same point that you're doing it for.
Steve, you mentioned, I don't want to look at a resume. I want to look at the person. I want somebody who's gutsy and someone who's passionate. And what's so interesting is if you think about how we're taught to write resumes and when you graduate school, how we're taught to interview, we're taught the opposite. that they give you, you're supposed to, practice the exact thing you say, to the top 10 questions about what's your greatest strength. And then you're like, okay, I need to say a strength that's real, but not arrogant. So I'll make it kind of humble. And they go, well, my greatest strength is certainly that I, always put my best foot forward. My greatest weakness is I'm a perfectionist. And that's what you're taught, but that's not really what resonates. That's not what inspires, leaders to give opportunities to people who are up and coming. I think it's the creativity, it's the thoughtfulness, it's the grit, it's the passion. And it's funny though. I'll say that if you look at LinkedIn, and you read any of the LinkedIn stories, that says, I was on my way to an interview and it started raining and then the car broke down and then I had to save a dog. And then on the way to the interview, I came in 15 minutes late, but the manager understood and I got the job.
Right. A lot of stories like that. When I am interviewing outside of the company, somebody's coming in from the outside, the only thing that matters to me is, did they resonate with me? Did they feel like everybody else out in our company? Do they feel like Jill and Jane and Bob and Joe and myself? And if we all feel connected, it's right. And, it's like dating before you get married, right? You don't want to just get married until you know the person and you know that they're, let me say this, culture is key. Knowledge has value. I don't diminish that. And education certainly says a lot for somebody that they can persevere. But the truth of the matter is culture is the baseline. And at Balto, it's got to be the same way, I'm sure, as it is at NobleBiz. We have to feel the same so that if my customer is speaking to me, they're not getting something different than they were speaking to Christian or somebody else. We're all the same.
Steve, that's so valuable. And I can tell you at Balto, we have this document that everyone who's new gets. Doesn't matter what department you're in, if you're customer facing or if you're code facing, and that's, and you never talk to another person outside your team, you get this document and it's called How We Communicate at Balto.
Good.
There's 10 principles for communication: authentic, justified, you focused, things that when you talk to someone at Balto and you talk to another person at Balto, we're coming to the market with a unified voice. And that means that, if you are having a customer service interaction with us, or you're, buying a new product of ours, that when you get handed off from the salesperson to the customer success person, to the customer service person, to the implementation manager, when you get handed off, you go, wow, that continuity was great.
Yeah.
They're all moving together with the same voice.
So here, what we talk a lot about is our promises that we make to our customer. And you have to say, well, why that? Oftentimes, promises are something everybody makes to everybody. So what's so outstanding about saying, well, we keep our promises? But it's really our core value. And we don't have a long mission. We don't have a long mission statement. I always think of going into car dealerships and sitting in waiting to get attended to, and seeing on their wall the 18 different points of their mission. But ours is simple, and it's that a client gives us a gift when they choose us, and it's a gift of trust. And I can't think of anything more valuable in my world than being trusted. And so what do we do with that gift is we return it with passion, with the things we can control: passion, relentless effort, sound process, consistency, dependability, and just being intense about what we do for the customer, and not for us, or not in a negotiation about what's good for the customer, but the customer is the whole point. And so that is our whole core value here. And it's always been that way within my life. And I look at it this way, is that when I myself expect something in service from somebody else, that's all I expect. I mean, people can fail all the time, and I can accept that piece. What I can't accept is when they don't give a damn. And we do.
I was talking with one of our customers about something very similar today. And I was talking about how when you're on the vendor side, it's so easy to underappreciate all the work the customer is doing to make the relationship successful. You're looking at it often from your own perspective, or your bias is to look at it from your own perspective, where you say, I'm setting all the meetings with this customer and I'm reaching out to that person and trying to integrate this thing and that thing and holding their QBRs, their quarterly business reviews, and their exec meetings and trying to build consensus. I'm doing all this. But if you take a step back, you'll realize, wait a minute, the customer is too. Yeah. They're talking to their team, and someone on the team is saying, I just don't know about this, and the customer says, no, trust me, I'm actually in great communication with them, and they're building consensus as well. It's easy to underappreciate what the customer puts in the relationship, and if you really are taking a step back and looking at things through the customer's shoes, you'll see all the time, energy, political capital, and money that they spend in order to work with us. And that's trusted if I've ever heard it.
And their future. I mean, you're mission critical, both of our companies. And this partnership we now have together, it becomes a mission critical piece if a client chooses us. Their entire ecosystem changes, their training, their approach, the approach they use with their customers. Everything is built around this mission critical piece that we're offering to them. And when you look at it like that, you shouldn't stop and say, well, what is really the customer's responsibility? Yes, they have responsibilities, but what you should say is, we'd sure love you to do this piece of it to make this successful. But even if you don't worry, I got you. We got it because we know how important this is to you. We will never abandon you. Okay. Things will go wrong because life happens, but we'll always be there for you. And if you it's a very simple thing for me to accept. What I find is hard is when you bring a new person sometimes into your company that comes from a more generalized corporate environment. It takes them time to really see it in action. It's, in theory, I think we all agree, yeah, we all want to do that. But when you see it in action, it's hard as hell to pull this off. And you're subjugating oftentimes your own need, your own ego, and you're saying it's about embracing the customer. That's the point. Years ago, I had a whiteboard. I had nothing on this whiteboard, and I kept needing money, and I needed a customer. And I had a product, and I had no way to figure out how to get a customer. And all I ever wanted was some names on that whiteboard that I could try to make a customer, much less get one as a customer. And when I got that customer, first of all, I realized, oh my God, they're putting their whole business in my hand. I'm scared to death. And secondly, what can I do to make that a good decision for them? Because I just can't let them down. And if you look at everything we do as we grow our companies, and listen, we're both growing now in our businesses and successful, and you have to remind our people, just like we are reminded ourselves, that everything is that first name on the whiteboard that you got to do something with and protect and take care. And if you just do that, I mean, when somebody in full circle comes in to interview for a job, can they fit that culture or can they not, regardless of what their background and experience is.
That's one of the reasons, Steve, that I think that culture is actually in many ways self-reinforcing and self-nourishing. Because imagine that you're on a team of 10 people, and the 10 people are all totally customer focused and willing to go above and beyond and make that customer successful. And then you're the new guy, and you're not that way. And you're thinking, what's the customer do for me? How do I rack up the biggest bookings I can this quarter? How can I sell them and get out? Those 10 people are going to look at you like blood. You'll be out of there so fast. So there's almost this, when you put the culture into your organization in the first place, it draws in people that are like that. It teaches people who are not like that, they don't fit.
They just don't fit. Right.
Or they kind of get pushed out of the organization and everyone can kind of feel it. But it's so cool that, Steve, not you nor I are going around the company saying, is that guy a culture fit?
Yeah, right. Well, you know it. You just know it. I often don't like to use the word family in a business because it is a business and not a family. But at the same time, you have to be familial. There has to be that familiarity with each other where you've got each other's back. And, I think about 10 soldiers jumping, having a plan to all jump out at the enemy out of the trees all at the same time. And if they don't all jump at the same time, there's going to be a great risk to somebody. Somebody's going to get killed or hurt or something, or it will go wrong. And you have to have confidence that you all will jump out of those trees at the same time to save your life, and in our case, our customers' lives. And if we take it that seriously, our customers will be fine. And if our customers are fine, we'll be okay too. Many times I see businesses making decisions within their customer relationship of affordability. Well, I have to go out, I have to jump on an airplane to go do this for a client. Is it affordable? Are they big enough? Are they important enough to me? Are they all these things? And what it says to me is many companies, certainly not most, get very comfortable saying no. Their comfort is in saying, why not? Well, I shouldn't. No, there must be another way around this, a cost-saving way, a simpler way to do something. And it's my belief that a company should be built on the idea of getting really comfortable saying yes. So when you hear no, or I'm not so sure, those are the moments that should be in question, not the moments where you said yes, whether it cost you something or didn't cost you something, because at the end of the day, it's the benefit to the customer becomes a benefit to you. Balto is a good example of this. You have a really good reputation, and we have a mutual client that really came to you because of a referral for you. Well, nobody stopped and said, did that referral come to Balto because of what you spent or said yes or said no to? They simply came because you obviously did every possible thing you could for your customer, and it was worth it to them to make that referral. And that's what you want to see.
Steve, I'll mention 3 principles that we have around, spending for the customer. The first is, and I mentioned this to our last 2 customer success leaders. I said, I imagine a day where we have a slightly bored customer success department because we've overhired in that area. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And I'll tell you, we're not there yet. Our customer success department is like working on all cylinders.
Right.
But I imagine that day. And the reason is that I'm never going to look back and say, gosh, we would have hit our goals if we just didn't spend so much on customer success. That would be crazy. The second principle, Steve, is that it is okay to do things that are unscalably great for your customers. So, we had, an example, I think this was about now 3 years ago that I remember, where one of our customers was on Windows XP. We sold the deal. It turns out they were on Windows XP. And we didn't support XP. We supported Windows 7. And we offered to buy every single one of their agents. They were small. They were about, I think, 50 agents, but still a license of Windows 7. And if you do that, they're going to remember, holy crap, this was the company that upgraded all of us to Windows 7.
You did whatever it took for the client is what you did. You lived it in real life, and you played it out, and you did whatever it took. And you said, yes.
Yeah. And then the last principle, Steve, is on the negative side. If you do something wrong, and I remember I learned this principle from some case study in undergrad business school, that if you do something wrong, you don't just correct the mistake. You correct the mistake, and then you go above and beyond to thank the customer for hanging with you. So, we won't just say, it was down, we'll credit that month. we'll credit that month and then give you something extra to
Right,
make sure
right.
that you are like showing that appreciation, turning a mistake or turning a problem into something that actually enhances the relationship and invests in the
Well,
relationship.
and taught you a lesson. It might be your process that needs to change. It might be your attention to the detail that needs to change.
Right.
But the customer, you're allowing the customer to be your teacher of, and isn't it logical? It's so that you learn what it takes to satisfy your customer. I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a logical thing. Years ago, like 20 years ago, I had this idea that when a customer comes into my office, and I'm in Denver, so customers have to fly in oftentimes to come into my office. But if they walk in my office, I always stop what I'm doing and I stop our company from whatever we're doing to satisfy that customer. They took the time, they came in front of me, they confronted a difficult situation. It was that important to them. And we stopped. And oftentimes what you'll find is, or you say to yourself is, why did it take that moment for me to do for the customer what really wasn't all that difficult to do, but for some reason along the line we chose not to do it or to hear it. And so we at that time invented what we called customer advocates, and it was essentially to be the customer in our shop. So because we knew that if a customer showed up, we always did what they wanted. So instead of making them hop a plane or get in a car to come to see us in those difficult moments where we weren't satisfying them, we said, look, there is a person here and their whole job is to be you in our company. And what that means is they're walking our halls. They get to walk up to anybody in the company, including me, and say, stop what you're doing and do what we need to do for this customer. Well, I had a partner at that time, and my partner was so frustrated with me. Steve, you're putting in an area that doesn't have an ROI. You haven't proven an ROI. I don't see the point. It's just more money in, money in. And I'm like, that's not the point. Okay, the point is let's just do the next right thing here. And we did that. We began to do it, but really over the years it turned into a very, in a sense, ROI driven profitable area, but not because that's its intention. The intention is simply to say, how do we give the customer a position in the company? Because in a sense, they're trusting their company to us. They deserve that. And today we still call it customer advocates simply because I can't think of a better name than somebody who advocates for me.
Steve, when you create new roles that maybe don't have a traditional function, a lot of times I think people find that scary because they say, wait a minute, what's this person do? What's that title mean? They can't place it in their heads. Um, but it also means that the world is your oyster and that person can look across the company and under with some very basic guidelines, piece together a role that is going to handle the most pressing priorities and the biggest challenges of the company. Those people are often your most powerful people, the people that have a new role that wasn't quite defined because they're able to take those pieces from all the things that need to get done and just get them done without having to worry whether they're stepping on toes.
Yeah, and there's no, they're inventing, in a sense, their process, or they're breaking every process, and they're just finding the arrow through it to get to the solution as quickly as possible. And you were saying earlier that when a day comes when your customer success people have time on their hands. I also think that another good day in that regard is when your customer advocates are somebody that every employee in the company wants to see. versus is hiding from, because oftentimes they see the customer advocate and they go, oh my god, I got to stop what I'm doing and do this. And when you have a company that begins to run where those advocates are friends, and they like to hear from them, and they look at things, like you said, as a gift from the customer saying, here's how you can get better as a company, that's when we'll know we've won the war, Mark.
I totally agree. If we go back, Steve, just a little bit to something that you were saying earlier about the promise that you want the team to deliver on, I think one of the things that people wonder is, how do we come up with those things, right? Like, how do you come up with a promise? Are you on a whiteboard writing out 100 promises and then you pick one? Or are you, going around and asking everyone what they think the promise should be? So when you're trying to come up with those pillars, like, the importance of customer advocacy and what the promise should be, what sort of process do you use to come to those answers?
It's a great question, and it's one we are dealing with all the time at NobleBiz. Uh, in fact, near term, right now. Um, it From my seat, it's common sense. It's and so this kind of goes back to my own philosophy of what is our job. We talked in an earlier call about what does the CEO do? What is our job as a leader of the company? Well, to me, a critical piece of what we do in our seat is we define the vision, and then the company's job is to understand, accept that vision, and strategically, tactically, comfortably implement that vision. Okay, and then there's its own life. It has its own evolution, but we never stray from what our core vision is. And I use the word core because it's vision and value to me are the same thing. What is my core value? And what do I want to do with that piece? So to me, our core value is, look, we make a promise, we're going to keep the promise. Okay, that's the deal. That's it. And we're banking on the fact that when we do that over and over and over and over, we're going to be compelling to the market because we really are working on that single point of reference, and it'll be beneficial to the market, to ourselves, and stakeholders, and everybody else. But it's banked on that single vision. So then the issue becomes, Steve says at NobleBiz, a promise is a promise, keep it. Use your common sense. But then as you go to begin to implement it, what every single department begins, as I have found, to define what is a promise differently. And it's not that they're wrong, but they're coming from their points of reference, their life, what their families taught them, and their own culture and society taught them. And what I've learned is it's incredibly different. It's very different. All well intended, but different. And then the idea is, then my job is to go out and to teach people, in a sense, what is Steve's definition of a promise? What does a promise mean? And then the second part is, if you just stop there, departments will take that, but then they begin to interpret it tactically, process-wise, differently based on the limitations that they see within their area. Maybe they're financial, maybe they're resource limited, people limited, tool set limited. And so they begin to make their own adjustments. And many of them have been trained in the world of learning how to say no, not yes, and be comfortable with that. And so in a sense, they're managing me. So my job is to not let myself be managed, but to then begin an inspection, department by department, process by process, SLA by SLA, between departments, the handoffs between departments and their internal workings, and then make sure that their approach, their dialogue is consistent with my definition of a promise. And I know it sounds very self-centered, Mark, to say mine, 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 but it has to start with a single point of reference, because there's too many things that we differ on, but we say the same word.
I totally agree. And it's It's really hard. That specific thing. There's so many things that you mentioned. Defining the vision and defining what a promise is and isn't. If you think about like defining the promise, the common sense, the first thing you think of is a promise is a promise, and then you say, well, a promise is a promise unless you can't keep your promise. And then the question is like, well, why can't you keep your promise? And if you promise to sell technology to a customer, and then you learn that they were a terrorist organization, you probably wouldn't keep your promise to deliver technology to the customer. So then you now have to go in detail and figure out, you can't figure out every single exception. You can't say, we promise to deliver acceptable customer experience unless they're a terrorist or they're that, or you can't do that. So then you have to develop principles of how people can think through what a promise is and have that common definition. I agree with you, Steve. It's a really challenging thing to do. And I'll tell you from the CEO's perspective, at least from my perspective, it can be frustrating, and it's an area that, I need to continue to learn patience, because exactly what you said, that everyone, brings their own perspectives and their own culture and their own upbringing, around define those things. And I'll say, what do you mean? Doesn't everyone know a promise is this?
No.
You're so right. There's a lot of gray area. And I think that, it means that, CEOs need to really be practicing, patience, and recognizing that the things they think aren't just commonly understood by everybody else, because what you're thinking is in your own brain, it's not in everyone else's brain.
Exactly. And that means constantly defining, redefining, talking, speaking. We have a monthly meeting with all of our people all over the world every month. Tomorrow's another one. And the only thing I ever talk about is our promise. I talk about it, I redefine it. It's like, oh my God, how many times can Steve talk about what our core value is? But it's always under debate. Internally, it's always under debate. There's always a disagreement. Everybody comes with their best intentions. Nobody within the company intends to not do it. And we often don't get it right, which means that your idea of patience is critical. But you gave me something today, a tool that I need to think through. And it's the idea of setting the principles. And I certainly probably can say that we've done that, but I don't think we've done it formally. And I think what you said we need to formally do here to get better at it. But listen, this is my life's quest. It's not to run a company. It's simply to see companies become promise keepers, because our world, our society will be better, and our next generations, if everyone is used to getting what they ask for over and over repeatedly without begging for it, and that it will train integrity. I've always said it's a customer's job to ask for more, not less. And if we can build a company, if I can build NobleBiz so it really does this and pulls it off, then it can become a model for other companies and other companies to do too. And over time, maybe 100 years from now, every company will be built on the simple idea of keeping a promise. But of course, it's got to be Steve's promise, right?
You're taking me to a crazy place, but now I have to go there, Steve. There's this concept in AI called extrapolated volition. And that's basically a system to teach an AI values. Because if you want the AI to make certain decisions, it needs to make decisions based on values. And philosophers debate, what's the best way to teach AI values. And, no one knows, because if you set a very specific set of rules, and, a really simple answer would be thou shalt not kill. What if there is a mass murderer in the room and the AI is the only one who can save him, and they can't decapacitate the person? That's the only option. Well, AI can't save anybody. So, sometimes, the smartest AI might not have a basic rule. Well, this concept of extrapolated volition is, who would we be if we were the version that we wanted to be as people. So if you, Steve, were the version of yourself that was the best you, the version you picture, the version that you want to be, who would you be and how would you act? And I think that you can apply that to the business world. If your business were the business that you wanted it to be, if it were doing the things that you picture that you are capable of when you think about who you are as a business, what does that look like? And I think that is an example of a world keeping their promises.
If you get to that point where you can train AI to do some of that, and you continue to evolve that area that you guys at Balto are working on, uh, it's going to be so powerful because it'll open up your own head. Forget the AI part, just to be creative enough to think about how do you teach that to a pragmatic thinker, meaning a computer. uh, that's going to be incredible. By the way, I have an answer for me personally. My own personal goal is to be the same as what the company is, which is keep it simple. Just be straightforward. Do what you're saying you're going to do, and do it over and over, and don't get drawn in by what you think is best for you. Do what's best for whomever you're with, your friends, your family, uh, your customers.
If you look at Noble Biz 10 years from now, and you go out to the year 2030 and you say, this is the business we've built, what do you picture Noble Biz will look like in the year 2030?
Well, our goal is to become the absolute leader in our industry, not necessarily from a revenue perspective, not necessarily from the number of customers we have. I do think peripherally that happens, that comes with it. But the single company that people say, yeah, I want to work with them because we're so sure of what we're going to get. And I expect that certainly builds us to become, we like to say here that that's the next generation of who we'll be. So that being said, we also have some normal business plans of, we have acquisitions, we have growth, we have other products that we're bringing into play. But we really want to be a funnel for best of breed for the pieces of communication that go into at least the verticals of contact center, whether first, second, or other party.
Do you think your promise will change, Steve? Because as you get bigger, it's hard to keep the same promise because your audience is bigger, if you will. So there's more types of exceptions that come up. And I think it's one of the reasons that as companies grow, they sometimes don't deliver the same way they used to when they were small. How do you think your guys' promise will change?
Well, years ago, I built a company within the contact center space, and we serviced about 5,000 call centers. Now, it was built on the same concept. So I'm in this life's quest here. And the quest, what I realized is we got to a level at that company where it wasn't the same anymore. And customers were beginning to say, Steve, now that you've grown so much, you're not doing the same thing. And I knew internally we were working at it. But as we got bigger, we began to degrade that piece of it. And I've never figured out exactly the formula for it. Okay. So how do you scale the promise without changing the promise? And that's where we're at. And the truth is, Mark, the goal in 1930 is to perfect that piece and say, how do you scale this core value to, no matter what size you are, it still works within its own context?
I'll tell you, I think that one of the core pieces of that, and I'm not just doing it lip service, I think one of the core pieces really is technology. Because if you think about how technology operates versus how people operate, technology is intended to create the exact same result the same way every single time. And if you can take more of your promise and shift more of it into technology, there's no person having a bad day. There's no, well, we overlooked that person in the interviews and they really weren't a culture fit. There's no, well, they're new and we haven't really taught them our promise yet, because the technology learned your promise. The technology is just delivering it again and again and again and again and again. So I think that a big piece of it is we want to be thinking, how can we be using the creative, unpredictable, cerebral aspects of people? And then how can we be, using the consistency of technology and constantly shifting the things that people are doing that require consistency to technology, and the things that require doing something totally a different way one time because maybe that'll work better, taking those things and shifting them to people. I think that's how it has to happen.
Well, I do. And I think that's what 75–80% of the battle is getting that automation piece right. And at the same time, the world is still human. And in that regard, we are so inconsistent. And, we've spent this last half hour talking about how do you make a single statement, a core value consistent? How do we have everybody's behavior be consistent with that? And we see how hard that is. And people are creating the processes, and then people are emotional, and we change. And today, I just talking to you, I really am in contact with my own promise keeping and my desire. But what happens tomorrow when I'm irritable and discontent? I just don't know. I don't know that we'll ever solve it completely, but I do know this, that we have to be relentless in our endeavor for it and never pat ourselves on the back when we fail, and rationalize it.
Relentless in our endeavor for it.
Yep.
Steve, what an awesome time today. Thank you so much for joining me. Real quick, where can people find NobleBiz and where can people find you?
Well, they can find me here in Denver, Colorado. Our office is actually in Cheyenne, Wyoming, our U.S. office. We're at noblebiz.com, nobelbiz.com. And listen, my own email address is always available at steve.biederman, BEDERMAN, at noblebiz.com.
Steve, thanks again for joining us. Great time today.
Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate it. It was fun.
Talk soon.